Boys and Girls Podcast.
I'm Sissy Goff.
And I'm David Thomas, and we're so glad you joined us for this conversation. Let's dive in. Folks, when we began dreaming about the Parenting Personality Series, we had a lot of fun ideas about what we hope to cover. The central idea for the two of us was that we would use this incredibly valuable tool of the Enneagram that we use in the everyday of our work at Daystar as a foundational piece of this Parenting Personality Series. And so we have been holding on to a little surprise for quite some time. We had the chance to fly to Dallas, Texas, and interview our favorite Enneagram teachers and spend time in their company learning, as we always do when we're in their company. Suzanne and Reverend Stabile, who we love dearly, have learned so much from. And we had a chance to sit down and first hear them talk about how they developed life in the Trinity Ministries and learn the Enneagram, how they found their way to this tool. And then we travel through every number and talk about the Enneagram and parenting. And it is such a rich, valuable conversation that we've been so excited to share with you. We've been holding on to this for some time. And hang on until the end, because after we travel through the numbers, we will spend some time at the end of the conversation talking about spiritual practices and disciplines for the numbers. And you are going to love this conversation with our delightful and wise friends, Suzanne and Stabile. This conversation is something we have talked about, dreamed about, longed for I don't even know how long.
Well, as you're saying this, it's making me choked up because I keep thinking you're going to get choked up because I know how much you love these two people. Yeah. I love them too. I just hadn't gotten to love them in close proximity. But
my goal is to get 5 minutes in before I cry the first time, but it may or may not happen because we are in the company of two folks that I love dearly and that we respect and admire. And it's impossible to talk about how much we've learned from you and how what we know about the Enneagram has informed our lives and informed our work. And there just is no way we could ever express that fully. And so it is just a gift to be with you and that we are remote today. We're at the Micah Center in Dallas, Texas. We would travel not just to Dallas, to the other side of the globe to get to be with the two of you, but it's so fun to be in this space where I have learned so much and means so much to me and that we get to have this conversation. So let's just start by, we'll ask you both just how long have you been studying and teaching the Enneagram? And will you just talk about how you think it informs people's lives and even more specifically maybe could inform parenting?
Sure. You want to go first?
No, I'll let you go first. I'll build.
Okay.
You started studying, I just followed you.
And listen to me verbally process every single thing. So there's a start.
Still do.
Joe and I had come out of the Catholic Church with Life in the Trinity Ministries. We started it there. And he had had some really significant spiritual experiences. And I had had some. And we didn't know how to unpack those after he decided to leave the priesthood. So I'm not the reason he left. I kind of wish I was. It sounds very romantic to me. But I'm not. And when we started dating, I think we realized that we had been such close friends while we were working together that there wasn't anything really that was different other than the intimacy and the commitment long term. And so in order to find a way for us to know what to do with these spiritual experiences that we'd had, he one day just decided he'd call Richard Rohr on the phone.
I was well aware of Richard Rohr as a speaker in the Catholic Church and a guide. And he and I had had very similar education experiences different religious orders of priests, but the same kind of preparation and study. And I had known of him all my years in the priesthood, and he started the Center for Action and Contemplation in Albuquerque the same year we began life in the Trinity Ministries, working together in the Catholic Church. So I just thought, well, I'll give him a call and see if he would be willing to speak with us and help us discern, because we had packed away all of these spiritual experiences we had. We weren't talking about them to anybody, and we felt the need to just share those and have somebody give us some wisdom to move forward with that. So we got in touch, and he said, come on, and we flew to Albuquerque and
Crazy.
met
with him.
Wow.
And then he said, well, let's do this again. So the next time we went, at the end of our time, and in those days, it was a lot y'all's time. Yours and Richard's, and I was there trying to behave. And Richard handed me, as we were leaving the last time, manuscript for a book on the Enneagram, his. And he said, why don't you take this? I think you might find this interesting. We'll talk about it next time we're together. Wow. And I would have eaten the pages if I could have. Like, I couldn't get enough. And then I started talking to Joe about it, and we started talking about who we thought different people were in terms of numbers and all that. And then we went back to see him again, and he said, I knew this would happen. I'm so glad that you have, taken to this the way I thought you would. And then he said, I have a piece of advice. And he'd only known me for 3 encounters. He read me really well. He said, I would suggest that you not talk about it for 5 years.
Wow.
Just learn. Observe people, read what's available, which in those days was not much. There were very few Enneagram books written. And they were all written by what I call the old guard, and they're now beginning to stop teaching, and I'm right behind the old guard, by the way. And so I did. It was Father Richard Rohr. It wouldn't occur to us to not do what he said to do. So I didn't talk about it for 5 years to anybody except Joe.
9th wonder of the world. That she didn't talk about it to anybody. But we talked about it a lot, and it became more and more and more a part of just our everyday life, and then how we saw one another, and we saw our children. And
it immediately affected our parenting. And the more we learned, the more adjustments we made in parenting. Our children are an 8 and a 9 and a 7 and a 4. So that's a lot.
Wow.
And we knew, it's almost like we spent a few months looking at each other and saying, that explains that.
Yes.
And that explains that.
Yes.
And then we would be across the room from one another, and we would go and hold up the fingers who we thought, what number we thought we were dealing with. And it affected our marriage. I think one of the best teachings that I've gotten from the recovery community is that every expectation is resentment waiting to happen. And I think it's so much easier with Enneagram wisdom to not have unrealistic expectations of other people, so that we're not asking them to give us something they don't have to give. And I would say now, I've been teaching almost 30 years now. And I have the humbling experience over and over and over of people saying, you changed my life. And I had watched that happen in Joe's ministry. He's, as a Catholic priest and as a United Methodist pastor, he's just not average. And his work and his gifts changed people's lives. And then we were sitting here about 2 years ago, maybe, and Joel and I were recording a podcast with somebody. And after we got off the podcast, Joel said, Mom, That's what we do here at the Micah Center. We create community. And that is what we do here. We just do it offhandedly. We didn't know that we wanted an LTM community, but we didn't realize that we would offer teaching that creates community between people who are here with us out of the picture. And I think that helps too. And the last thing I would say about this, David, from being in cohorts, generally when you walk into a room that you're going to be with people for 2.5 days, you introduce yourself and you start with where you're from and what you do, which of course refers to how do you make money. And here, people walk in and say their name and what's your Enneagram number. And that means that small talk is set aside from the very beginning with no instruction to do that. Because as soon as you say, I'm a whatever number you are, then people have a brother or a mother or a boss, and they start asking about that. And it's one of the things we say is every day is a surprise to us. Every part of our journey is a surprise, and every day it gives us gifts that we certainly didn't expect.
So once Suzanne started delving into the Enneagram, she began to understand the expanse of the wisdom and the application of it in so many different ways. So I think one of the unique pieces that we were able to do in Life in the Trinity Ministries was to take the initial understanding of knowing your number, what number you were, and then as she continued to grow and learn more and more, begin to expand that into applying it to Enneagram and, which has broadened the work that we're able to do in Life in the Trinity Ministries, certainly. And then all of a sudden, the Enneagrams became this ancient wisdom, became something that everybody wanted to know something about. And it's out in the world, and more people are beginning to question what is it and how does it work? How does it compare with other personality programs and all of that, which has expanded our outreach and our opportunities with all of that.
Recently, well, not maybe 2 years ago, but that's recent when you're our age, right? I asked Cheryl Fullerton, who is my literary agent and our friend, and she has been my literary agent since the first book. And I said to her, how did we get here? Joe and I have been talking about how did we get here? And her response was a long obedience in the same direction.
Yes.
And that's how we got here, just doing the next thing. And in part because Joe's an Enneagram 9, so his orientation to time is the past. In part because he was with the Vincentian Fathers from 14 to 40. And just in part because he is who he is. He will not make a 2-year plan, a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan. Never has. We don't have one. And our board of directors keeps trying. How about it just a 2-year plan? Nope. Because everything that comes our way, because of Joe's way of being in the world, has to be prayed about, thought about. And so when Joel and I get all excited about some new thing that we want to do, and we can't wait to tell him, and we forget that he's not going to jump on board and say, great, let's do that. And that we immediately know that we're going to have to wait. And all of that good discernment is the bedrock of where we find ourselves.
I think a big part of that for me is we didn't set out to start Life in the Trinity Ministries. We were both just trying to respond honestly, faithfully, obediently to the spiritual experiences that we were having in our lives at the time. And it drew us more and more to work with one another and to work alongside one another in the Catholic Church, which was rare for a priest to be working with a lay woman in the Catholic Church. And then as I chose to leave the priesthood, the question remained, now what do we do? How do we continue to be obedient to this? And so every step along the way has been just an honest discernment of what is the next right thing to do and what's the next step that we need to take. And calling Richard was part of that. It was a prayerful decision. That was the next step to take. And doing the Enneagram was the next step for us to take to begin the cohorts, was just a prayerful next step to take. And so I honestly don't know what the next step is. We'll continue to try to be obedient, and the next step will come, and we'll pray, and we'll do the right thing.
The founder of the Vincentian community, which is the community of priests that Joe belonged to, was St. Vincent de Paul. And the woman who worked beside him, her name was Louise de Marillac, and she always had ideas and wanted to do things. And Vincent's response was always holy delay.
Mm.
And Joe insists on holy delay.
And Suzanne hates it.
I do dislike it very much. But I would say that in terms of parenting, holy delay is very helpful.
Yes.
Wise words.
And that's holy delay is different than ignoring or delay. Holy delay is I could do the right thing and offer great love with whatever we need to do in this situation, or I can react and do the wrong thing. And you can do the wrong thing with great love.
And I think some of the wisdom that we learned about the Enneagram was just dealing with our children. The deep understanding that Enneagram is based on your motivation, not your behavior, was lived out with us, with our children all of the time, because Suzanne and I are both other reference. We both do very similar behaviors, and we did similar behaviors with the children.
For very different
reasons, very different motivations behind them.
Now, a quick break to hear from one of our incredible sponsors who make the podcast available.
David, I have to tell you, I have fallen in love with my kitchen again, and it's all because of my Blue Salt Always Pan 2.0 from our place.
Same here. I've got mine in sage, and listen, I'm not out here trying to be a chef, but the first time I cooked eggs in that pan, they slid out like it was a magic trick.
My nephews were so impressed, they thought I'd secretly gone to cooking school.
But here's the thing. Most nonstick pans out there are full of harmful chemicals, PFAS, and Teflon. One scratch and you're basically seasoning your food with plastic.
Oh, no, thank you. That's why I love our place. They're toxin-free, safe, and still high-performing.
And it's not just the Always Pan. Their cookware set is brilliant. 2 pans and 2 pots that replace that giant stack of mismatched cookware in your cabinets.
Plus, buying the set saves you $150, and all the pieces come in those gorgeous colors. Mine look like artwork sitting on my stovetop.
Mine looks like relief because cleanup is so easy.
Friends, stop cooking with toxic cookware and make the upgrade.
Upgrade to Our Place today. Visit FromOurPlace.com/RBG and use code RBG for 10% off site-wide. With a 100-day risk-free trial, free shipping and returns, you can experience this game-changing cookware with zero risk.
David, do you know what most kids' vitamins are basically made of?
I don't want to guess, but I'm afraid you're about to tell me.
Candy. 2 teaspoons of sugar, dyes, and all kinds of gummy junk. No wonder my nephews thought vitamins were dessert.
That tracks.
But now they actually ask for their high vitamins. They taste great, they're zero sugar, and I love that they're made with a blend of organic fruits, veggies, and 15 essential vitamins and minerals.
And you let them decorate those refillable bottles, right?
Yes, they had a blast covering theirs with the stickers Hyacinths in the first order. Now it feels like their vitamin, which means I don't have to nag.
That is a parenting hack right there.
And are you tired of battling with kids to eat their greens? Haya has daily greens plus superfoods. My nephews drink the chocolate shake version, and I may have taken a taste. Let's just say I get why they love it.
You get the cool bottle once, eco-friendly refills every month, and you don't have to stress about what's inside.
We use it with our family, and you should too.
We've worked out a special deal with Haya for their best-selling children's vitamin. Receive 50% off your first order. To claim this deal, you must go to hiyahealth.com/RBG. This deal is not available on their regular website.
Go to hiyahealth.com/RBG and get your kids the full body nourishment they need to grow into healthy adults.
And now back to the show.
Will you talk more about that? Would y'all jump in and give, for anybody who's not familiar, will you give Suzanne an overview of the Enneagram as it applies to parenting, just each number?
Sure.
Kind of big picture. And then, Joe, will you jump in with maybe a spiritual practice for each number? And y'all pull over and write down because you're going to want to keep these notes. That's right. Yes.
It's a little bit harder to give a specific practice for each number.
Okay.
But I can give, after Suzanne does that, I can give sort of a direction to go to find what practice would be best for each individual in their number. Yeah.
Love that idea. Thank you.
Let me start by saying this. Our daughter, Joey, who is the 8, and she's our oldest, and she is now doing Enneagram work full-time in corporate America. And I always said that you couldn't know a child's Enneagram number until they were 17, 16, 17. And Joey and her husband, Billy, didn't agree with me about that. And they both were educators. And Billy still is running an unbelievably wonderful program at UTD. And they came to me at one point and said, okay, we'll meet you partway because we believe that you can know what stance a child is in. And I thought about it, and they're right. You can know that. The unfortunate piece of that news at this moment is that Enneagram wisdom builds on itself. So the reason we do what we do here is because I teach every level of Enneagram work, and then Joe comes in and applies all of that to the work that he does. And you can't just start with stances. So if you are parenting and you think in this moment, oh, well, then I'm going to learn Enneagram stances right now because I want to be able to know that. It really doesn't work that way. You have to first know your own number, and you have to know that you're right. And then you have to understand triads. So the little piece I could say, and like this is a day. So if I pull this off, y'all owe me dinner.
You got it.
Deal.
There are, and it's agreed upon, and I'm sure the two of you will agree, 3 centers of intelligence. They're just 3, which is lovely, because if there were many more, we wouldn't know what to do with them. And they are thinking, feeling, and doing. And the Enneagram is very adaptable and a home for those 3 centers of intelligence. And when you look at the figure of an Enneagram and you start talking about the things like stances and triads and how they lay on the Enneagram, then you know that what we say when people, I don't defend the Enneagram to anybody. If they don't like it, it's fine with me. People say, well, what's it about? I say, it's just true. It's just true. And if it's not helpful to you, that's okay. But after you know your number, then you got to learn about the triad you're in, because it's determined by which of the 3, thinking, feeling, or doing, is dominant. And in all of us, there are 2 that are fairly strong and 1 that's not, that we use last and least. And that's where stances come in. And Joe is not a good example because you're dominant in the same thing, but I'm a great example of so many things. Don't you think? Some good and some.
Yeah, that's a different podcast.
It'd be a fun one, though. So I am feeling dominant, but I'm thinking repressed. This is a tease. I take in information with feelings. And even though I've written 3 books and I'm writing another one and I teach and I do all things, I'm thinking repressed. And that's because I used to spend most of my thinking time thinking only about relationships. And that's great, but it's not an effective use of a whole center of intelligence. So that's a little bit of an example of that. Well, if you're raising children, you can tell if they're not doing what they're supposed to do, if they're not sharing or showing any feelings when they seem to be called for, and if their thinking is just not complete. If they do things that it seems they didn't think about or they didn't think through. So if you want to use the Enneagram and Enneagram wisdom for parenting, then you have to be willing to put in some effort to know enough about it to use it wisely. Culturally right now, we have trendy Enneagram. And I don't mean that disparagingly. Affectionately, I could call it trendy Enneagram. But it's not traditional, ancient Enneagram wisdom. And it's not being used as that. And it's just a process to learn the things you need to know to do this well. Let's start with 2s.
Great. We'd love for you to leave one for last. You know, I'm a 1 as well.
Oh, bless us all.
Bless us all is right.
Truth.
Could take a while when we get there.
All right. So 2s as parents generally made up their mind that they wanted to be good parents when they were young, before they had children. And they, of course, had defined what good parenting meant. And as I began, I'm an adopted child, so I felt like my view would be different. But as I began to parent, I was aware that there were other people who had the same dreams that I had. And mine was, I want to be a good parent every day for all of my life. And I want to keep learning about what it means to be a good parent. And I am a good parent, and I've made a lot of mistakes as a parent. And if we have time at the end, I'll give an example of a mistake because while it's embarrassing, it's a really good example of how Enneagram numbers can get it wrong. So I was good at disciplining our children, but then I had to go visit them wherever they were in timeout or grounded to make sure that they still loved me. It was like I would send them there, and then I would go say, no, in one way or another, we're good, right? Like, you know, you have to be here, and I love you so much. And yeah, very ineffective, but it made me feel good. Another thing with 2s is that we are in the feeling triad, which means we're feeling dominant. But every number in that triad really has a problem with feelings. And 2's problems with feelings is they feel other people's feelings, but they don't know their own. That's not a good place to be for effective parenting with integrity. Because it means still to this minute, and did when the children were little, that I feel how they're feeling. So sometimes my goal was to help me feel better. And generally what makes an adult feel better and what makes a child feel better is not the same thing. Father Rohr makes sure when we're with him from time to time now that I still use this word with integrity because it's associated with 2s. And the word is cloying. Cloying. The definition is horrific.
Yes, it is.
And I can't quote it verbatim because every time somebody reads it to me, I stop listening. So David can tell you, I ask people in the room to read it because I don't want to remember it. And cloying is an exaggerated sense of needing and wanting to be together and wanting everything to be okay. And you don't just do that with other adults. You do it with children as a parent too. And 2s give advice. Their talk style is help and advice. And they advise their children too much, which can be problematic. Now, at this moment, anybody who's listening who doesn't know the Enneagram is probably thinking, is it all negative? And my answer is, if you only give me an hour, yes. And the reason it's negative is because we do not know ourselves by what we get right. We know ourselves by what we get wrong. And so I'm going to share the things that we get wrong in parenting. People will recognize themselves much easier than if I did it the other way.
Oh, and there's so much freedom in admitting that.
Yeah. Or having somebody just tell it to you.
Right.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Here's what you do.
Right.
3s are feeling dominant and feeling repressed. So that means they take in information with feelings, all information, but they don't use feelings to decide what to do with that information. So it's very tricky in parenting because you have taken in the feelings of a child. So you know what they're feeling, but you don't use that to decide how to move forward with them. And so 3s fall back into what works for them. And that is try to be a success at any cost. With little kids, somebody else has decided and defined for them what success is. And so they begin to live into what a parent who's a 3 wants them to do, and they get the most attention for achievement. And it has to be achievement that would be valued bigger than just for the child in order to satisfy the need that the 3 has. And ultimately, with a 3 parent, success for the parent also can include how people see their children. So that's tricky.
Yes.
Very tricky. And success feels like such a good and right thing. And for 2s to just love them and wrap them up with too much love and offer too much advice feels so great when you're doing it. 4s. 4s are the most complex number on the Enneagram, and there are fewer 4s, I believe, than any other number. And part of the problem with 4s as parents is that they are the only number on the Enneagram that can bear witness to pain without having to fix it. They are often in a melancholy mood, which for them feels like home base. But for children, looking at that, it looks sad, or it looks like we haven't done the right thing as children. If we did, then mom or dad wouldn't have this melancholy. And in the complexity, the reality is that there are always a lot of layers beneath the layer that you were shown. So if that's the way an adult 4 is operating in the world, then that's also the way they're operating at home, except with fewer boundaries. And I think it's very difficult for children to read a parent who's a 4. And if the 4 parent isn't doing any of their own work, then it's a big challenge to adapt to what the child needs. I'm going to go backwards for 1 second and just say that 3s have a unique ability to transform into whatever the situation calls for. And 4s have a tendency to overcorrect when they have to adapt. And so when they adapt to happy, then they overdo that. Or when they adapt to sad, they overdo that. And that's a pretty wide range for children to try to navigate. All right, we're leaving the heart triad. Now we're going to think. Or other people can. I'm thinking repressed, I've done some pretty good thinking around the Enneagram. 5s. I'm going to teach this one by telling a story. It's a miracle I haven't already told a story. Let's note that.
And that's 10th wonder of the world.
A friend of ours started a nonprofit for adopted children. Most of them were international adoptions, called My Treehouse. And she wanted to do some work with the parents and the children using the Enneagram. So Joey wasn't teaching Enneagram then yet, but she's known the Enneagram since she was 18, because that's when I learned it. And she decided that maybe she could help with the children if we used animals instead of numbers.
Wow.
So rather than look at the Enneagram and try to add an animal to the number, she read about and researched animals and then added the number to the animal. So I'm going to run through those.
Yes,
Please.
would love to hear them.
Okay. 1s are worker bees.
Of course.
2s are kangaroos. They got a pouch, all the things.
Can
3s
bop you sometimes.
3s are eagles. 4s are butterflies. 5s are owls. 6s are bunny rabbits. 7s are monkeys. 8s are lions.
Mm.
And 9s are turtles.
Huh. That's great.
Brilliant.
And it's fascinating to watch children identify as one of those if you read a story about those animals.
Mm.
In doing that, then she was working with the children. I have the parents. And it turned out that a number of people in my treehouse who were parents worked at Baylor Hospital because that's where the founder had worked. And she knew lots of people there. And then there were a lot of other parents too from international adoption communities. And I'm teaching 5s now. And in the room, our room out here, who seats 42, that's our sweet spot for working with people. In that space, I ended up with 6 females who were 5s on the Enneagram, who had adopted children, and 4 of the 6 were single parents. Now, we're jumping to 5s. 5s are the number on the Enneagram that has the most measurable amount of energy. 8s have the most energy, 9s have the least energy, but 5s have a certain amount. And they wake up with that amount of energy every day. And you can't save up for the weekend. You get it every morning, and it's like manna from heaven. You get what you need for the day, and then it doesn't keep overnight, and you don't get any more till the next day. Every time they're touched, every time they're in conversation, answering the phone, at the grocery store, at their jobs, it takes some of that energy. And so their desire is to get home from being in the world before they run out of energy. Children need them. And like if you have a child like me as a 2, then they need to be touched and held, and I'm sure that you all work with families where children need a great deal of holding and physical touch and care. So I'm looking at these women, and I'm aware that they have 3 of them, maybe 4, had children with attachment disorders. So the solution is holding. And they were just saying help. And I was aware that I didn't know how. I didn't know what would be helpful. And I talked to Joe about it, and I thought about it, and then it hit me because my mother was a 5. And I didn't have an attachment disorder, but I really loved as a 2 being held and touched. And I just looked back and she died in 2001. So it would have been a long time ago. And I was looking back, and I thought, I always had long hair, and she always used to just put me on the floor in front of her. And we're both facing the same direction that way. And she would brush my hair and talk to me while she was brushing my hair. And then she'd braid it. And then I'd get a little restless, and she'd unbraid it and ask me another question. And she'd brush it some more and put it in a ponytail. And she intuitively was giving me what I needed without me taking from her. She also, and I don't know how she figured out, but she figured out when I was restless, if she would let me put my head in her lap, and if she would just gently play with my ear, it would calm me down. It would be all I needed. And she'd tell me stories while she did that. So I believe there are intuitive ways in 5s to make up for the deficit and the challenge of just not being able to handle that much touching. And it's not something you can outgrow or overcome. It's the same. 5s will die waking up every day with the same amount of energy and trying to use it wisely. 5s are also all hid. So everything needs to be talked through and logical. And, children don't have the same attention span that we do, or the vocabulary that 5s have, etc. The other thing I would say to y'all about working with 5 parents, and I know I haven't done this with every number, but 5s gather information, and it's their safety. And they file it. And when they get too much information at one time, they can't file it and they lose it. And if you lose it, that for them means they can't retrieve it. So that's just a reality. 6s. I think there are more 6s than any other number. And 6s struggle with anxiety. They're anxious about many things. And that makes them anxious parents who parent with anxiety because it's how they see the world, and it feels so right in terms of protecting your children. Don't talk to strangers. Don't set your backpack down somewhere and leave it. You better get a sweater. It's going to be cold this afternoon. Don't share your lunch because you need all of these nutrients that I put in the carrots. Don't. Be careful. Be careful, be careful, be careful. Don't. Watch for this, this, and this. So children of 6s grow up with, I don't know if there's a thing of as a kind of paranoia, but they're not paranoid. But there is a kind of paranoia that comes with, I left my backpack in the hall and I'm not supposed to set it down, and all the danger, stranger danger, all the things. 6s overdo that. And it feels like such good parenting. So all of the examples I'm giving, it feels like such good parenting when a 5 tries to reason with a child rather than just send them to their room. It's just difficult because of how we see the world, and we see it so differently. 6s, in terms of a gift, they're the most concerned about the common good of all the numbers. And so they like group projects, and they like to be in groups, and they like to be the troop mother for the brownies, and they like to do all the things. And as children get older, they don't want their mother to do all the things, or they don't want their father to be the only one who coaches them, all the things. I remember that I'm aware that sounded a little gender specific and could be misinterpreted, and I wouldn't want that to happen. I'm a great coach, so not only men are not only the people who coach, or women who do scouts. I'm just giving examples because I have to go fast, and I'm used to 40 minutes per number. So so far,
you're doing
really
amazing.
great. Don't look at the clock because I can tell when you do. 7s. 7s on the Enneagram as parents are the fun parents. Joel's a 7, and his children really love hanging out with him. And he loves hanging out with them. And he has had to learn boundaries. And he's got a little one now. She's our youngest grandchild. She just turned 6. And she's got to have boundaries, or she's going to get him in trouble. So I think 7s have to be very aware that children rely on them for the big stuff, and they can look too much like a playmate than a parent. So they really have to work on boundarying their way of relating to life so that they relate to children with the discipline and distance that children will ultimately need. 8s have the most energy of all numbers, and they're the most well-defined. They have to do a lot of work to know, personal work, Enneagram work on themselves, to know how to parent without too much aggression, without too few options for children, and without too much of, this is how we do this. Joe and I have always tried in parenting to just say, remember who we are. Not who Joe and I are, but who we as the Stabile family are. And with 8 parenting, sometimes it's so strong that children don't feel like they can ask questions or don't know what will happen if they break the rules, which causes dishonesty. And sometimes they don't feel like they have choices if they are in trouble for how to respond. Or on the other hand, 8 parents are the best protection a child could possibly have for all things. all things. Why don't you talk about 9s? I'll come back and do 1s.
9s as parents, we have a tendency to be a little more laid back because our motivation is to not be in conflict. And so we don't want to be in conflict with our children, and we don't want to be in conflict with our significant other about how we're parenting our children. So it's sort of a game we play of balancing all of that out all of the time. Because we're sort of laid back, I think children find us to be peaceful and thoughtful and easy to get along with and comforting throughout the circumstances of a life situation.
Safe.
A safe place to be and a comfortable place to be. Because we as 9s tend to merge with other people, I think one of the things that we have to be careful is that we don't merge with our children or merge with some of their behaviors and allow them then to just get away with it because we would prefer not to be in the conflictual situation.
One of the things, too, that we have to watch for, was you merging with me.
Yes. Yeah.
Because he didn't want
conflict on this level either.
So he would merge with what I was doing, which meant the children were only dealing with one parent. And that wasn't great.
So sometimes the children would ask themselves, are you doing this because you, Dad, want this? Or are you doing this because Mom wants this and you're the one who's asking for it?
Yeah, we had a lot of work to do around that. And the other thing we had to do work around, too, I think, was the discovery that if the children wanted to do something little, they would ask me because my answer was yes. But if they wanted to do a big thing, they would go to Joe because his answer to those was Joe. So they played us for a long time before we figured that out.
Yeah, for sure.
And they helped each other. It's like they handed down, here's how you get this, and here's how you get this.
Don't go ask Mom, go ask Dad that one.
Okay, I'm glad we saved 1s for last because I want to be very sure that your audience knows that I know that parenting is what you know everything about that needs to be known. And there's no question with the two of you that you would understand yourself as 1s in roles that included parenting. So the way I'm going to talk about this is to say that I can't talk about this with integrity unless I start here. Adult children of 1s talk to me more than any other number about their parents. And they have stories to tell about the things that their parents needed to be done a certain way, if not their idea of perfectly. And the reason they talk to me about it is because, I think one of the things we have to remember, anybody who's listening to this has some tools to work with. And anytime any of us are teaching anywhere, speaking anywhere, doing what we do, I think we have to remember that people don't have the same tools we have. They're not the same professions that we're in, and they don't have the same things to work with to make good choices. And so lots of times when adults talk to me about their parents, I have to say, and what tools did they have? What did they know in order to be able to do something differently? And a 1 who has not understood themselves or the Enneagram, or nobody's taught them what the Enneagram teaches, ask for more from children than they can deliver. Because 1's way of seeing, and we can change what we do with how we see, but we can never change how we see. Another way to talk about that is how we take in information from the environment. And the way 1s see is they see what's wrong. Now, for y'all professionally, you can look at a family and see what's wrong. What a gift. And what a problem.
Yes.
Absolutely.
because you have to work to see what's right. That's not what shows itself to you.
Yes.
Well, that's not what shows itself to one parent either. And they believe that doing things perfectly is the best that's possible to offer. And they have to really back up in working with children who are another number. Children, as ones, live with a great deal of conflict inside themselves. Let me give you some examples. Children who are ones don't like to erase. It messes up the paper. They'd rather start over. Our second oldest grandson is a 1 on the Enneagram. We were with him last night, and we were aware all night of how he sees. And I think 3rd grade, 2nd grade, he kept having to erase and not erase, but he didn't want to, so he'd start over. And he was missing recess every day. And his mom got involved. I wanted to get involved, but she told me it really wasn't my business. So one day, he finally got it right. No erasing in time to go to recess. And he was so proud of himself, and he took it and turned it in. And the teacher said, "Oh, you didn't put your name on it. You'll have to stay in again today." So I think there are good teachers and not great teachers. And our 4 children have had both. Kids who are ones who have a parent who did a sport, or an older sibling who was in sports. And parents will say, "Why don't you sign up for soccer? Let's sign you up for soccer. Don't want to play soccer." "Well, let's give it a try." Don't want to give it a try. "Let's try t-ball." Don't want to. The reason they don't want to is they don't want to do things that they can't do perfectly. So they have to be nudged to do those things. Okay, the thing I was going to say to you as you talk about spirituality is I think what Joe has to offer is a different kind of what I offer, maybe the baseline that's the most important. Because you can build more easily on what Joe's going to say than you can without it.
What I would say about spiritual disciplines and spiritual practices, most people come to those words with preconceived ideas from their experiences in churches or their past life. And they understand that a spiritual discipline or a spiritual practice for them is like reading my Bible, getting up and doing a devotional sometime during the day. Depending on your denomination, maybe doing some fasting in your life during Lent. It's those kinds of formal spiritual practices. And I think the very first thing that people have to understand is the whole reason for any spiritual discipline, any spiritual practice, any spiritual activity is to open ourselves up to the intimacy that we already have with the Holy One and the ways in which we experience that intimacy with God. So if we're talking with Enneagram work, Suzanne already mentioned that the 3 centers of intelligence. And as she talked about, there's one that's dominant in your triad. There's one that's last and least used in your stance. So once you know your Enneagram number and you know what triad you're in and you know what stance you find yourself in, then one of the very first things that I would recommend for someone as a spiritual discipline or spiritual practice is to find some activity or practice that is going to help you bring up whatever is repressed, or the least and the last. So if doing is least and last for you, then find some practice that is going to involve you doing something specific that deals with your experience of God. If it's thinking, then get some spiritual reading books that are going to challenge you and challenge your thoughts about theology and about God.
One thing I would just say is I wanted, as a 2, knowing this from Joe, I wanted to read somebody who was my number and read their work as it came annually or by, I don't know how to say that word, but whatever the word is for in the order that it was written.
Yes.
And I, without knowing how much he had written, I chose Henry Nouwen. Well, as it turns out, he wrote 42 books.
I was going to say, that was a lot.
And I read all of them.
Wow.
And I could see myself in his struggles.
Mm.
So if you can read journals of persons, and we can help with that with the list, then it helps you know somebody else is struggling with the same thing you are.
Mm-hmm.
And it helps you see yourself so you can go, oh, I wish he wouldn't do that.
Yeah. And so the same is true for somebody who is feeling repressed. Then a great spiritual practice is involve yourself working at a shelter or working at a center that's feeding the poor or handing out clothes to people in need and those kinds of things, because it's causing you to bring up what is least and last for you, your feelings. So that'd be the first thing, if you understand your Enneagram number, is go towards whatever is least and last for you in the stances and find an activity that brings it up. Because so many of us consider spiritual disciplines and spiritual practices as sort of limited because of our church experience to Bible study or devotionals and those kinds of things, I'm going to give you a definition that comes from James Finley. He was a novice at Gethsemane Abbey in Kentucky under Thomas Merton, did not remain in the Trappist order, but went on to become a psychologist out in California. But I think this is absolutely the most perfect definition of a spiritual discipline or a spiritual practice. So I'm going to give you the formal definition, then break it down. The formal definition is any act habitually entered into with your whole heart that awakens, deepens, and sustains within you a contemplative experience of the inherent holiness of the present moment. Mm-hmm. So the thing I love about it is it starts out with any act. So it expands it into almost anything that you might do as a parent. And the key is when you do this act, whatever it is, it awakens, deepens within you your awareness of your connection to the holy. That I know when I do this act, I feel God's nearness, I feel God's presence, I feel God's closeness to me, and I'm opening myself up to whatever that means for me in that moment and the activity of God within me in that moment. So it expands spiritual disciplines and practices into taking a walk outside in the woods, baking bread in your kitchen, writing poetry, if that's what you like, gardening in the backyard. It can be almost anything that you do, and when you do it, you are more aware of the nearness of God to you, which then is always, whenever we're open to God's nearness and activity in our life, it's a transforming moment because we're allowing God to do something within us to allow parts of this personality of Enneagram that we've put on to chip away or fall away a little bit, piece by piece.
Say that thing you say about God rearranging things inside of us.
Yeah, I always love that because any act, any spiritual act, the intention of anything that we do spiritually is to open ourselves up to the activity of God and just say, God, here I am, and I'm open. That's why I am such a proponent of contemplative prayer, because I think it is by far the best spiritual act and spiritual discipline. But St. Augustine said that whenever we open ourselves up to the activity of God, we are allowing God to do this interior rearranging within us. And so we're opening ourselves up with whatever act this is, and God is invited to come and begin to rearrange within us whatever that causes some of that spiritual transformation that needs place. And then so what James Finley says is when you find that act, whatever that is, that opens you up, he says you just keep going. It's like finding a neighborhood that means something to you. You keep going back to that neighborhood. You go back to that over and over and over, to that experience.
I was going to give a couple of examples of not great parenting. One is that our youngest is a 4 on the Enneagram, very complex. And 4s, the number one thing for them is relationships. Number one, from birth to death. That's the thing. And he was having trouble in school and didn't feel like he had any good friends and all that. And I listened every day and felt what he was feeling because I'm a 2. And one day I said to him, Beej, I wonder, do you think it would be helpful in making friends if you could just act a little more like the other kids? That's the absolute worst thing you could say to a child who's a 4, because the one thing they hold onto their whole lives is being authentic. It's just bad parenting. And I've confessed it 1,000 times, and I still feel bad about it. So here's ineffective parenting for you. We sent our kids to timeout or to their rooms. Same thing sometimes. And sending a 7 to their room is like sending them to Disneyland because of their imaginations. Joel and I had a conversation about this recently, and I'm not exactly sure that I'll quote this like I want to or like he said it, but the gist of it is, when you sent me to my room, there was an unlimited amount of stuff I could do. The thing that I hated was when you talked to me and talked to me and talked to me and talked to me and talked to me. And the reality is, of course, that he quit listening. And one of the things you have to know as a parent who's a 7 and about children who are 7s, they can, in real time, 100 times a day, reframe whatever comes at them. So think about how parents who have children who are struggling or who need help parenting reframe the whole thing. It's not that bad. Maybe I shouldn't have done that, but look how it turned out. Thanksgiving's going to be so much better. That reframing is so dangerous. I think dangerous is the right word. Mm. So with children, you have to keep asking, is that really what happened? Is that really the way it happened? Did it hurt your feelings? Joel loved playing basketball, and he is a good basketball player. And if he ended up in a game where he didn't get to play as much as he wanted to, I can remember being in the car, and I said to him, I'm so sorry you didn't get more playing time today. It's all good. And then we've heard it's all good from him from then on, because that's reframing. It's all good. They don't want to think about it. They don't want to. So now let's flip that and have parents saying, it's all good. I think it went really well. Tools. It's just all about what tools you have. And I've never met a parent, you all may have, I never have, who I didn't believe was doing the best they could in the moment.
Amen.
And so our work is to offer what we each know to help parents do the best they can in each moment.
Mm. Beautifully said.
Yes.
It is exquisite how much wisdom the two of you have shared in this conversation in the little amount of time we've had And my great hope is that it has prompted every parent listening to say, I want to go deeper because I want more tools. I was thinking back to, Suzanne, when you talked on the front side of our conversation about how learning it began to open up space to make adjustments. And I love that language. And I think you too will never know. You just will never know through your teaching, through your writing, through the cohorts, through all of your offerings, like how many people have began to make adjustments in their marriages, in their parenting, in their work, in their friendships, in their lives. And there just are not enough ways to thank you all for being willing to have this conversation with us in this time, and not enough ways to tell you what we have learned from you. And for any parent listening, I don't want to miss an opportunity to say, I want to strongly encourage you to get a copy of The Path Between Us and The Journey Toward Wholeness.
Yes.
And those books have been transformative in my work and my life.
I mean, I would say apart from the grace of Jesus, your work has helped me give myself more grace than anything else
Amen.
I have encountered.
Amen. Amen. You just will never know the lives you've changed you to.
Right back at you.
Thank you.
You won't either.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
And this is what we hope will just be the first of many conversations we would get to have with the two of you in our journey. So thank you both for saying yes to this invitation.
You're so welcome.
Thank you for asking us.
Thank you for having us.
Will you say website? Where can folks just find everything that y'all are doing?
lifeinthetrinity.ministry.com. Okay. The EnneagramJourney.com, and our podcast is the Enneagram Journey. And boy, we have learned a lot there.
Us too.
Man.
Thank y'all.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Can't wait till next time.
David, what a team we have that we get to call friends who help make this podcast possible. Chris Starrett, our engineer.
Our management team at KCH.
And we are thrilled to be a part of the That Sounds Fun network.
Our music was created by the insanely talented Dave Haywood of Lady A.
And if this podcast felt helpful to you, please consider subscribing, liking, sharing, all the things.
We are grateful for you and cheering you on always.